What you're seeing right here, that is not a lineup to get into one of Canada's many overcrowded emergency rooms, or a lineup to get into a job fair for a single job vacancy, as we've seen, and it's not the unemployment line after 10 years of Justin Trudeau. No, this is the lineup to get into Pierre Poilievre's Canada First rally in Winnipeg, Manitoba. That's right, guys. This is the lineup to get into a rally for the party that we are led to believe is tanking in the polls. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jonny Says So, episode 24. Are the polls fake? I think it's a very fair and valid question to ask. When you look at the situation on the ground, if you look at Pierre Poilievre's rallies, if you talk to people, if you listen to what everybody was saying, thinking, and feeling just a few months ago, you start to wonder what's going on, don't you? Now, I'm talking, of course, about the situation that Canada was in just a few months ago when Justin Trudeau was still our Prime Minister, before Donald Trump started responding to Canadian tariffs, and things looked a lot different back then, didn't they? Look at this. So this was January 5th, 2025. Look at this, guys. BC, 35-6 for the Liberals. Alberta, 36-1. Saskatchewan, 14. Manitoba, 11-2. Ontario, 101-11. And Quebec being the only outlier with the Bloc Québécois at 45, Liberals leading with 19, Conservatives at 12. New Brunswick, 8-2. Nova Scotia, 9-2. PEI, 4. And Newfoundland, 5-1. And now look where we're at. In BC, the Liberals enjoying a slight lead, but they're basically neck and neck. Alberta and Saskatchewan seem to be the only provinces that have a modicum of common sense. Manitoba, they're in a dead heat. Ontario, the Liberals have pulled way ahead, 78-40. Even in Quebec, the Bloc Québécois is now second, with the Liberals having a comfortable lead of 40, Conservatives way behind at 13. New Brunswick has the Conservatives only having 3 seats to the Liberals 7. And this is my favorite part, guys. They expect us to believe that the Conservatives aren't going to have a single seat in the House of Commons from Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, or PEI. I don't buy this for 1 second. But, to be fair, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, and I'm going to point out that a lot has changed from the first data set that I just showed you. The most obvious being Justin Trudeau is no longer the Prime Minister, and a lot of people were starting to wake up to the fact of just how terrible he was for this country, and they were willing to give Pierre Poilievre a chance. Fair enough. But I find it hard to believe that so many of these people are willing to overlook the fact that Mark Carney was pretty much driving most of these terrible decisions that he was making. And another big factor that we can't ignore is Donald Trump's tariffs. Fair enough as well. But I also find it hard to believe that people haven't been listening to Pierre Poilievre spout almost the exact same rhetoric about reciprocal tariffs. And, they both seem to be talking about building up our country where we can have the infrastructure to compete with the Americans and be sustainable on our own. Now, there's also the question of polymarket. A lot of people like to point to polymarket as a more accurate indicator of what's going to happen, but that's not always the case. Now, for those of you who are living under a rock, polymarket is an American betting site where you can place bets with cryptocurrency on pretty much anything you can imagine under the sun. And politics have been very popular on the platform recently, as we saw in the American election just a couple months ago. Now, Polymarket's data suspiciously mirrors the Canadian polls. You have the exact same dips, exact same spikes around the exact same time frames. They actually had Poilievre recover here for very briefly a couple of weeks ago, only to have Mark Carney shoot back up to the moon. But Polymarket can be flawed as well, because it's not like this is driven by any sort of real-life data sets. At the end of the day, it's a betting site. It works exactly like a casino, and it can be manipulated. So let's say if somebody wanted to boost Mark Carney's odds in there, all they would have to do is mass place a bunch of bets for Mark Carney. And would the Liberal Party have the money for that? I mean, they did just pay for a bunch of billboards in the United States about the tariffs to try to get the Americans on their side. Haven't told us how much that cost, as I covered in my last video. So, it stands to reason that polymarket could suffer the same sort of manipulation as the polls. It'll certainly be interesting to see if polymarket will change their odds anytime in the next week as more and more of Mark Carney's scandals come to light. Like this, guys. As I covered in my last video, we had the Liberal MP Paul Chiang, who called for the kidnapping of a rival Conservative MP, Joe Tay. Now, the media has actually been doing their job and going after Mark Carney about this, and he's doubling down, folks. That's right, Mark Carney has no problem with one of his MPs advocating kidnapping. Let's go see what he has to say. Gov.exe is corrupt, putting this out on Twitter. By the way, guys, you should really follow this account. He posts multiple times a day. He always has hard-hitting information and does a really great job bringing clips out. So follow gov.exe is corrupt. Mark Carney says Paul Chiang, a Liberal MP who wanted to deliver Canadian Joe Tay to the Chinese embassy for a bounty, will remain an MP. He says he's deeply offended but sees this as a teachable moment. I'm effing tired of these teachable moments from the Liberal Party. Hear, hear, gov.exe.
Good morning, Mr. Carney, Rafuji Canyon, CBC News. It's not just opposition parties calling for Mr. Chiang's resignation, it's also at least 13 civil society groups. What message are you sending to Canadians who are worried about pressure from China when you allow him to stay on?
Look, I am deeply offended by those comments. As I said, they're a terrible lapse of judgment. I view this as a teachable moment. It underscores the respect with which we treat human rights in this country, the differences between Canadian society and other countries. This, after all, though, I will go back to the character of the individual who made a lapse judgment. This is someone who has served our community, has been on the front line of policing for almost 3 decades.
He's been on the front line of policing for 3 decades. If anything, this means we should hold him to a higher standard. If there's anybody who knows what the law is and when you break it, it should be a police officer who has served for over 3 decades.
And has been standing up for those rights and has that track record for it. He's made his apology. He made it to the public. He made it to the individual concerned. He made it directly to me. And he's going to continue with his candidacy. Thank you.
Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you think any of this stuff with Mark Carney's scandals is going to affect the polls? Because if it doesn't, I'm leaning more and more towards these polls being completely fake, biased, and astroturfed. And speaking of being astroturfed, that's the problem and the question surrounding the polls themselves. Now, obviously, I've never personally taken a poll. I don't know anybody in my own personal life who's taken a poll. So it sort of begs the question, is there some sort of sampling bias going on with these things? Again, I've never seen what one looks like, so I don't know. But I want to point to a couple of interesting things that I found surrounding a couple of the major polling institutions themselves. Number one, Ecos Polling has a government contract. You can search the database of Canadian government contracts by amount, so government contracts over $10,000. Ecos Research Associates comes up. So it's a fair question to ask, are they biased? Are they one of these institutions that relies on government funding, like the CBC? And there's the Angus Reid form. Now, I'm going to try to zoom in so you can see this, but This is an example of some of the questions that they're asking, and they're very leading questions, and they're very biased, and they almost point you in a certain direction. From the survey, now we'll turn to some reasons people give to support or oppose some of the parties in the upcoming election. You've chosen to hear about Mark Carney and the Liberals. Which of the following statements comes closest to your own view on why people should vote Liberal in the next election, even if none is exactly right? Option 1. Pierre Poilievre is a radical extremist who would risk the rights of Canadians. We cannot let him win and become Prime Minister. The only way to stop them is to vote for Mark Carney and the Liberals. They're the only ones high enough in the polls to stop the Conservatives. Option 2. Pierre Poilievre would bow down to Trump and let him walk all over Canada. He wants to privatize our healthcare system to be more like for-profit American care. He wants you to pay for your own healthcare. We have to stop him at any cost. The Liberals are best placed to challenge him. Mark Carney is the best guy to stand up to Trump. Option 3, none of the above. Option 4, don't know, not sure. All that aside, though, it's hard to ignore the facts on the ground and the things that you can see with your own eyes and ears. This is Pierre Poilievre's rally tonight, actually, in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Look at this, guys. Fredericton on a Monday night. Full house for Poilievre. Just look at this crowd. He filled a hangar. And I want to show you something else. This is hilarious. Alex Zoltan on Twitter. By the way, this is another account you should follow if you're not. Follow Amazing Zoltan on Twitter. He makes this hilarious compilation of Pierre Poilievre's rallies versus a Mark Carney rally. This is something to see. This is my favorite part.
So sorry, guys. We were at capacity. Seriously?
So, like, it's not a big pub. Sorry, guys.
I know. I was thinking that.
It's not that big of a pub. So you have about 30 disappointed people that can't get in.
Sorry, guys.
So does that mean we're going home? We're like... Right, precisely.
That would be a plan.
That looks really bad.
Why would you invite more than the capacity? That looks really bad. Man, I hope those people go home and do some hard thinking and digging for some facts themselves.
Hi, guys. What do you think of the Paul Chiang scandal? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you agree with Mark Carney's decision to allow Paul Chiang to stay as a candidate? What do you guys think? Anyone have an opinion on Paul Chiang? It's a very serious matter.
They probably haven't heard of Paul Chiang.
What do you guys think of Paul Chiang staying as a candidate for the Liberals, even though he called for a conservative? Think that's befitting the Liberal Party that you know and love? Are you worried that maybe he's one of the 11 MPs that were compromised by China? Is it something to laugh about?
You're something to laugh about.
Well, Mark Carney wasn't laughing today. He said it was deplorable. Do you agree?
Do not believe the polls. This is massive.
Don't believe the polls. This is absolutely massive. I couldn't have said it any better myself, and I think that summed it up pretty well. Anyways, guys, that's my show for the evening. And I'd love to turn it over to you guys in the comments. Do you believe the polls? And if you like what you see here, drop a like, share it out on your social media, and most importantly, subscribe. Together, we can override the dying, lying legacy media. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.